Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along today. This session is entitled Why We Should Invest in XR Stories. It is 10 o'clock Central European time. It's 9 o'clock where I'm talking to you from now. And for all of those joining from different time zones, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for getting up in the middle of the night. I hope you enjoy today's session. Welcome to the session. I'll be hosting a lively debate around the role of storytelling in XR. And just to let you know, first of all, the format of the session today, we will have 90 minutes in total, so we won't take any more of your time than that. And we'll kick off with 3 presentations. Each of those presentations is around 15 minutes long. And then that will be followed by a panel discussion where we'll have about 20 minutes for the panel to discuss the topics that came up in the presentations, and then around 10 minutes at the end where we'll open the floor up to any questions that you have for our panel of experts. So please do take notes as you go for your own benefit going forwards, but also just for the purposes of questions at the end. If you have any burning questions or anyone you particularly want to direct a question to, please do so. And I think you can also kind of put questions in the chat so they get remembered later. So we'll be joined by 3 speakers today, all of whom have very different stories to tell. Sorry, apologies. All with different backgrounds, but all with one shared passion, which is XR storytelling. So how can this new frontier of media build a better world? And what are the business opportunities for XR in the present and in the future? So as well as why we should invest, I think we're also going to touch a little bit today on how we invest. What does the business of XR look like right now? What are the positives, negatives, and opportunities for change? Today's speakers and panelists will include Victor Aguilon, Marta Odeg, Leo Chengshang Li, and Liz Rosenthal. Many of them you will already know perhaps, but all of whom I will introduce as the session progresses. I will be your host and moderator. My name is Paul Long, and I'm a UK-based XR artist and creative director of MBD. MBD is an immersive storytelling arts organisation, and we are 25 years old next year. The background of the company lies in theatre and immersive installations, and we are an Arts Council England national portfolio organisation. Which means we're very much focused on the artistic and storytelling output of immersive media, as well as socially conscious storytelling for museums, galleries, festivals, and online spaces for the worldwide XR community. In the last 6 months, our work has been shown at around 20 festivals on multiple continents, with 7 festival awards from those 20 showings. We began working in XR in about 2015. And we've generated skills that cross the worlds of VR, AR, and large-scale 3D building projection. Our work is all generated in Unreal Engine, whether that's for live events or online projects, and we've used it for everything from live linking motion capture data from dancers in different countries to our current development work on Theatre Electric, where we aim to reimagine production and distribution of immersive theatre for arts audiences. That will be for groups of up to 6 people at a time who'll share the same physical and virtual space as they collectively experience socially conscious storytelling experiences with friends and family. I'll just share a very quick 1-minute show reel of MBD's recent work, which will wrap up my my introduction, and hopefully then you'll see the broad range of applications we found for 3D animated live render content, from outdoor shows to heritage films, and then I'll get on to introducing our speakers for today. So, moment, be able to load up the video. So thank you very much. Enough about me and my work. On to the first of today's speakers. The first of today's speakers will be Victor Agoulon. Victor is a founder member of Targo, and Targo is based in Paris. Makes amazing immersive cultural documentaries using 360-degree video. Targo's founders were originally interested in VR for people beyond games and trying to fill the gap between mainstream games and the more experimental film festival works. And Victor and his colleagues are constantly searching out inspiring stories and people who have amazing experiences that are relatable and interesting for a broad audience. From the rubble of 9/11 to the view from space, Targo's stories are consistently engaging, immersive, and thought-provoking. Victor will be joining the panel discussion at the end session as well. But first, Victor, please take your 15 minutes in the Laval virtual spotlight and tell us the story behind Targo.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for this introduction. Let me try to get the presentation to work here. I think it's working now. Can you confirm that everything is working?
I can see that, Victor.
Yes, perfect. Good. Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you very much to VR Days for inviting me here to participate to this session. So we have the next 15 minutes to talk about why should we invest in XR stories. Very briefly, and I think Paul did a perfect job at introducing me, but so this is my real face beyond the metaverse look that I have now. So my name is Victor Aguilon. We co-founded Targo 4 years ago, and we are very much focused on virtual reality true stories, right? So what we do is really a strong focus on documentaries, nonfiction, but extraordinary stories. So we've produced more than 15 documentaries. We've harnessed more than 5 million views online. So I think we have a good experience at what virtual reality means for the mainstream audience and distribution. So what really interested me in this presentation today was the question about investing. Like, why should we invest in XR stories? And what I think is so interesting about this is when we talk about stories and when we talk about investment, there's always this kind of innuendo, but this kind of like underlying theme that, stories are not really generating any kind of revenue in VR. It's like, it's the arts and it's not really generating revenue. So as a creator, my goal here today is just to kind of like lay down the ideas of why we're doing what we do and how we are doing this. And for us, there's two main reasons on which I'd love to develop today. The first one is the fact that we need to offer some entertainment, and it is a radically better form of entertainment in VR. And the second is that we are in the works of proving a business case around XR stories. So the first element is offering a new kind of entertainment. I think the idea of offering and not, kind of demanding a new kind of entertainment is important because today, as creators, it's our responsibility to take the risk to create new content. There's no huge demand in VR. There's probably 5 to 10 million people who have a VR headset. So I think it's really on us to kind of create the demand. So it starts from us. From a broad perspective, the way we see virtual reality for us is that it's a content-driven technology, right? The reason people put on a VR headset is because they want to see things, they want to do things. The way mobile probably was more of a communication technology and computers and internet were, communications technology. I think virtual reality is bringing depth to content that we already have access to. So it's profoundly what content means. But this content, is broken down in all sorts of categories. You have the gaming, you have the fitness, and you have the stories. And stories have this specific, kind of spot into the VR in the sense like they're passive. So what people allow you to do in VR, what people think they will be doing in VR is really very active. Stories bring this kind of removes the sense of performance, of scoring that you have, and that's really what makes stories stand on their own in VR. And the first reason why we should invest in them, I think, is just because they provide a much better experience for viewers. What I mean by this is that when you look at all the different media that exist today, there's nothing compares to VR for a certain category of content. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly to what it is, but that's our job as creators to find what kind of content VR in which kind of content VR outperforms all the other one. And I think it's very obvious if you look at some pieces of content. If you look at Space Explorers that was done by Felix and Paul, that allows you to like literally go into space and look at the Earth from the ISS. If you look at Micro Monsters, a piece produced by Atlantic Studios, that shrinks you down. You really shrinks you at the level of insects, and that allows you to see them as really enormous monsters. Or the piece we produced that takes you really inside Notre Dame, right after the fire. These are experiences that really no other media can allow you to do. And so that's the first reason why VR, stories have a true value, is because for users, they provide something radically new and radically better. And that's probably the only reason why VR stories have a chance, at staying there. And the fact that XR stories and tomorrow augmented reality stories are going to stay here, it's because they provide something that's radically better than the rest. And I see the margin of progression from TV to VR the same way as it was from radio to TV, and that's really where we stand today. So that's the first reason. The second reason is stories inside the world of VR only. They really allow us to connect to the real world. I don't know how many of you own VR headsets, but you've probably, as well as I have noticed, when you go into VR, it always feels very disconnected from the real world. You have all these games, all these apps, but it doesn't feel, in the now. It doesn't feel like it feels disconnected. And VR stories are really a way to kind of like bridge the two. I think they're allowing us to connect the metaverse to the real world in the sense that with a story which is modern, which is happening now, that you're seeing in your headset, you feel more like, everything is connected. Let me take two examples. The first one is a story we produced this year called Surviving 9/11. We released it for the 20th anniversary of the attacks this year, and it was one of the best launches ever done on Oculus TV because it was exactly released on September 11. And I think people heard about the news everywhere, and when they put on the VR headset, they could also see the news, and they had a new perspective that only VR could allow them to have. So that was a big element that I think creates this kind of cultural relevance, this sense of immediacy that only VR can bring. And the second one is Inside COVID-19, a piece that talks about the pandemic, which creates a connection between what you're seeing in your headset and what you're seeing in the real world. So this is not something that I've been able to see in games and in other kind of content. And that's the kind of thing that stories really bring to the world of virtual reality. So there are these two dimensions that for me really justify the investing as creators, and what it brings to users in this in this field. The second element is that we are looking and we're opening a new market. And when I'm saying this, I really mean in terms of like we're proving a business case. So let it be clear, there's never going to be anything that's going to be generating revenue in VR unless all of this becomes mainstream. And we have to be realistic about the fact that this pace of progress of virtual reality has been slow. It's been slower than we all anticipated and expected, but it is what it is. And so today, when we look at the progression, I think we see not only a progression in the user base, but we see also a progression in terms of what kind of verticals, what kind of pieces of content, what kind of content gets validated. And when you look at this progress, I think the first one was gaming. Gaming is not even a question anymore. You've seen all these companies that have been acquired that are generating revenue. But recently, something very interesting happened when Oculus acquired, Supernatural and their fitness application. I think what's interesting here is that it's the first time that we have a use case, a business case that's proven around something in virtuality that's not gaming. And I think it's important because it shows that there is a space of progression where the industry is progressively opening and we are validating vertical by vertical like this. And I think it started with gaming. Now we are onto fitness that seems to be validated. And I think the next ones are going to be work, travel, and stories. I don't know in which order, but it looks like these are probably the big themes that are coming right now in virtual reality. So the question of when stories are going to be a kind of a real business for virtual reality, I think it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. And for us as creators to accelerate this, there is a big need for us to consider stories as a product. So this is usually controversial when you talk to, I would say the arts world, because stories are seen more as a product of the arts. And I see this with my background more as a product that we need to be able to replicate, where we need to find a format that's something, that's going to be able to allow us to scale, to distribute more efficiently. And so that's a big work in progress, but we have to find, the equivalent to what the Instagram stories were in terms of distribution, and allow storytellers to kind of fit into this frame. So it means that we need to find unit economics, finding content that's cheap to make, that's on which we can get high distribution and that we can replicate easily. And this is much more documented when you read in the tech world about this whole question of product market fit. But that's what we need to bring into this, because VR operates very much like a tech environment, more than, let's say, a storytelling and a classic, narrative business. So the reason why we need this is right now we're really at this point where we need to bridge two things. We have audience. We've made more than 5 million views. We know that people have interest. We have incredible watch time in VR on our PCs. So we know that there are people who are interested in what we do. And the big question now is, how do we translate this into revenue? And so for us, it means that we have to find a fine line between gaming and between storytelling, right? We need to bring something that's a little more interactive, something that, that really has this feeling of, okay, this is not just a video that I'm watching, because I don't think individuals are willing to pay for video as good as it is. And I don't think there's ever going to be a business model around charging customers for video. But I do think that there is a business model around stories. And this is right now really this production research we're on right now, which is finding this kind of like in between, this gray zone that feels like a story, but that acts like a game, in the sense of, the level of interaction and agency we give to the user. And that's also the probably a spin is, we don't think, and I don't think of the people who are using VR as viewers, but mostly as users. And that's also a spin, because that's bringing more and more of the tech world into this and into virtual reality. So I think the end goal for us as creators is really to go to the point where we are able to consider content as a service, and that's where we're trying to go. We have already a catalog of 15 documentaries, but our goal is to go much further than this. The goal is to have probably, let's say, 100, and to be able to really distribute at scale. But that's a business model we see in the end, right? So it's probably selling a subscription where you have something a bit Netflix-like, where you have lots of pieces of content, and where people are going to be able to identify, let's say, a brand, a creator there, and kind of like giving a clear path for distribution. But content as a service is really the goal, and what we're trying to work toward. And just as a note to finish on this, and then maybe to leave the floor back to Paul. I think there's this kind of underlying idea that stories are not working in VR. We have to think about, and we will not remind ourselves enough that we're an industry that's relying heavily on the headsets, and that today we see progress, that as headsets make progress, as more and more people that watch longer, and so we kind of tend to overlook these factors now, because there's all this hype around the metaverse and everything. But until the day we have perfect headset that people don't think look weird or not too heavy, we won't have anything that is going to be near mainstream. So we have to keep thinking that maybe today the verticals that have been proven, gaming, fitness, are probably also only enabled because of the devices that we have today, but that in 3-5 years from now, the devices that we're going to have are going to allow us to do much more, and that are going to also allow us to really prove business case around the stories. So this is it for my presentation. I think why it's important is, people don't buy a VR headset for the stories that they do, but I don't believe that there's ever going to be a mainstream virtual reality and metaverse if we don't find a way to bring stories into it. So my deep belief is that it's probably not the reason why people came to VR, but it's probably the reason why they're going to stay. So thank you very much for your time and attention this morning, afternoon, or evening. If you have questions, I'd be happy, to take them during the panel later today. But thank you very much. And Paul, I leave the floor back to you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I don't know if I'll make a habit of this, but I've decided I'm just going to pick out one phrase from the presentation that I really liked. And in this one, it was the fine line between gaming and storytelling. I'm going to leave you with that one. Maybe we'll come back to it in the panel discussion later. But I think that's maybe the area that we're maybe all interested in to some extent, is how the worlds of games, storytelling, video, etc., will all converge in one space. And I think that's what VR and XR offers us. So thank you for that. On to the second of our presentations. The second presentation today will be from the amazing and inspiring Marta Ordeg. Marta is the founder of Garage Stories, an innovation lab for content creators to explore and play with the endless possibilities that XR technologies bring. Garage Stories is a socially conscious XR storytelling organization who aim to shape XR content that encourages us to work together to shape a version of the future we want to live in. Marta is, I hope, currently fast asleep as it's the middle of the night in her time zone, but she has recorded her presentation for today's conference. Bridging the world of technical innovation and community farming, Marta will take us on her journey, share her dreams, and touch on the work of fellow creators, innovators, and business minds behind Garage Stories. Marta will not be joining the panel discussion again later because it is the middle of the night for her. So yeah, if we could dim the lights and put on Marta's presentation now, that would be much better.
Thank you so much for inviting me to VR Days 2021, such a special year where things are starting to bloom. So it's a perfect moment to talk about why should we invest in stories. So how many of you were told you were dreamers for wanting to be creators, name it filmmakers, artists, writers, whatever? Potentially the image that people had on their head was something like that, and they would just tell you that this is not a real job, that you're just going to starve, and blah, 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 blah. That is just entertainment. But is it the only value that media and stories have? Let me tell you a short story for the sake that we're talking about storytelling. So once upon a time, there was John, who is a farmer and also an entrepreneur. From his travels all over the world, he discovered a new vegetable that was very healthy and had plenty of nutrients. So he decided to go back to his hometown and buy a big piece of land to grow it and help his community have a better quality of life. But the first year, despite he had plenty of good seeds, he had no production. What happened is that his land was not fertile, and next year, with the help of his friends, he fertilized the earth, and then he got an abundant production. His seeds bloomed, and he had plenty of vegetables to sell to his community. But by the end of the season, he had a lot of leftovers, and his lands were so big that great part of the production was being rooted. So he saw that he had some neighbors who were struggling that year due to a plague. So he decided to invite them for a dinner and share the leftovers of his production. And during the dinner, they decided to start farming together, sharing their land so they could rotate the cultives all year round. More and more people start joining the community dinners, and by next year, all of John's production, which was double because he had so many extra hands, was totally sold out. Plus, they also grow other fruits and vegetables that their neighbor had seeds, so they had a huge variety of fruits. Plus, the town had a very fertile soil and a very healthy community. And now let's imagine that this seeds and these vegetables or fruits are ideas, startups that are advocating for positive change. And let's imagine that stories are actually what fertilizes the ground or the minds of people to be ready for change. And then if we add ideas plus stories and multiply it by collective action, then maybe the idea of a better world starts being possible. My name is Marta Rodech and I am the founder of Garage Stories. And this is story that I just told you is so core to our vision and to our mission. What we do since 2017 is to organize community labs all over the world. We don't have physical space. We work in North America, South America, Europe, all over, bringing together the brightest minds, storytellers, technologies, psychologists, business experts, etc., all together to explore the potential of emerging media and tell stories and create experiences that fertilize the ground for change. Um, in order to explain how we got to this point, because of course the way we started was a bit different, I love to take you through our journey and some of the most important mistakes, which eventually became learnings that we encounter on the way. We started back in 2017 in Silicon Valley, and we were really focused on the technology, VR mainly, but also AR, and we're just focused on exploring what we could do with these technologies. But what happened to us, and to put an analogy with a garage, would be that we knew the tools that we had in the garage, but we had no clue which was our end goal. And this translated to technology would be the fact that we knew that technology could do a lot of things, but we did struggle a lot in actually understanding that it's not only about the possibilities, it's about designing how do we actually want to use the potential of this technology and learning to select what's that things that are actually relevant, engaging, and necessary. Related to that first learning, we also learned that the question you ask is super relevant. So at the very beginning, our labs, the premise was to ask, how can we tell stories with emerging media, which is the language of all these new mediums that are emerging. But by asking this question, we got like amazing experimental projects. Like we have so many short films and experiences and things that means live action with VR and so many cool projects. But what happens somehow is that most of the projects we find it very difficult to engage with people who were not really interested in these mediums. It was really difficult to articulate the value of these projects and also how do you push them forward. So at the end, if you have an empty space, doesn't matter how great is your project because you have no audience. So we realize how important it is to be able to establish a bridge between these great ideas, this great experimentation, and also people who cares, or people who could actually do something with all this knowledge. And from this, we sort of evolved in starting to ask this other question. What does the world care about? Or rather, what does the world need? And what role play stories in it? And we start thinking about stories beyond technology. We start thinking actually of the very beginning of stories, understanding that they are the most powerful tool that humankind have. It's a way we save the past, we deal with the present, and we project the future. And stories are particularly powerful when they work in constellations. And by constellations, I mean stories that, despite having different characters, different settings, and different events happening on them, they all reinforce one same message. And just a very clear example here, these beautiful movies from Disney that do a very poor favor to the role of women in society. And despite all the stories are different, they all reinforce one same message. They did in the past. I think Disney is doing a great job now in changing those narratives. Or also, for example, these TV shows, Sex and the City, that right now it's so commonplace, but at that time it was such a revolution that women at this age could actually have fun and behave like men. So stories have the potential to reinforce or destroy social standards, let alone stories that talk about the future. They create collective imaginaries of what the future could be. And if you look at all these movie posters, they all, despite being different stories, they all reinforce dystopian futures with single heroes. So at the end, if that's all the possible futures that we can imagine, doesn't matter how much we complain about them. At the deep down, we are accepting them as accepting that this is what's going to happen. Also, I was lucky enough to discover this amazing book by the Nobel Prize winning economist Robert Shiller, who talks about the narratives of economics and how economics can not only be understood by the research done by the researchers, but by the stories, whether true or false, that people on the street believe. And he gives a couple of great examples, like the Great Recession in 2007, 2009. It was so influenced by the secondary effects of the Great Depression that had taken place over 50 years ago, but people still remember how bad it was, and people were so scared. That's actually what triggered the recession. Or let's talk about other narratives. The fact that a lot of people believe that artificial intelligence is going to replace everyone's jobs. These narratives is actually very dangerous, and it could have a huge impact on a speculative markets like real estate or stock if people keep believing that they're actually going to run out of jobs, especially in countries that have high unemployment rates. Or to give an example of a positive narrative, Bitcoin. Bitcoin became so popular not only because of its economic narrative, but because it was attached to values of freedom, of rebellion, and plus it was invented by someone whose identity is still unknown. So it was a very powerful narrative to attract young people who didn't necessarily invest on this coin only for its economic potential, but by what it meant and the values that it had attached. So why do stories have this immense power? A few reasons that I've selected. Of course, there is way more, but in the first place, they create a safe space. The separation between the narrative events, storytelling, and narrated events, what takes place in the story, provides an emotional distance that lets people feel safe to feel the capacity to make their own opinions based on that stories that are narrated. They have the freedom to negotiate their truths and interpret rather than give opinions. Also, in stories, emotions are the main character, and that's what binds people together. Plus, the fact that there is someone telling that story, it implies that he's sharing his point of view. Therefore, it creates more space for people to feel free to express their point of view, because we're accepting that it's more subjective. Also, the storyteller has a role. When someone is telling a story, he's taking the center of a stage, and the message we're giving is, I am listening rather than I am interrogating. Also, the most basic need that humans have, which is to understand life, is such a great hook for stories. We're compulsively trying to understand why things happen and also trying to predict what's going to happen. And stories work so well by this model of thinking. So why do we think that XR can actually even add things on top of it? And it's because all these adjectives that XR can bring into our stories. So let's forget about the name of the technology. Let's talk about interactivity. Let's talk about immersivity. Let's talk about social experiences and all these adjectives that we're actually adding into our stories. Therefore, if before we had all these values that regular traditional stories have, safe space, emotions being the main character, storytelling having a role, and understanding life being a hook, then we start adding all these things in new worlds that we are inventing and where people can actually exist or feelings are valuable. Plus interactivity. provides people with agency in that stories that we're telling. We make this agency tangible. Plus, the immersivity allows people to get dramatically involved in the stories. Plus, the fact that we need to understand in these immersive stories, we're actually allowed to explore. So, XR makes that stories and turns them into worlds of exploration and co-creation. And also here, another very interesting reflection about impact. Impact is not necessarily achieved with an end product, but it's through a process. And I've chosen this image very carefully because this monument, the Machu Picchu, was built in 50 years to only be used for 100 years. But it was more about the idea and the power associated to it that makes it so relevant. Plus the fact that despite most times we portray historic events by single characters, it actually is such a resilient building that's still standing up, could only be put together because there was a group of people who believed in that idea and that attached meaning to it. So following this idea that impact is achieved through a process and not as an end result, we designed this board game that we call Stories Times Future Impact, where we actually divide the process of creating impact in 5 different stages, making an analogy with community dinners. As you can see, we really love them. But essentially, what we provide is a board where we have dissected the process of creating a project in different stages. The ingredient, which is your message, your characters, everything that goes in it, kitchen, creators, invitation, how do you reach your audience, presentation, which is the final format, and bill, who pays for it. Is it your final audience? Is it a sponsor, etc.? And then we provide a lot of trigger cards that help you identify and spot opportunities for impact all through the process, by choosing who tells that stories, how do you bring that to people, etc. So reaching back to our conclusion, because we don't have much time, as we were saying at the beginning, we believe that we should blend stories because stories are such a great fertilizer for change, paired with powerful ideas. And there is so many brilliant people with so many bright ideas. Plus, if we manage to foster collective action, we believe this better world is possible. And our grain of sun looking towards 222 in this line is this incubator, Stories Times Future, where we're going to bring together tech pioneers and social justice leaders to super inspire creators all over the world, help them be formed into teams to, at the end, co-create stories that help us envision positive ways of collaboration between humans and machines. And here is a very short trailer to finish my presentation. So thank you so much. That's all the time we have. This is part of a much longer presentation, but I hope that if this has inspired or sparked your curiosity in any way, we're super happy to talk, to find ways to collaborate, and to foster this collective change for a better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marta, from afar. A virtual thank you from a virtual space, considering you are neither here in person nor virtually, but thank you nonetheless. Really, really interesting presentation there. And I think it really brings home the need for collaboration. I think there is fragmentation that's been discussed already today in terms of the XR market, different people coming into it, all from different backgrounds. I think a big part of the key to success will be collaboration, and where there is fragmentation, to make that into unity, and from there we will find the best work, I am sure. The third presentation for today, and our final presentation indeed, will be from Leo Cheng Shang Li. And Leo is joining us to introduce the work of Taiwan's creative content agency, Taika. Leo has prepared a presentation covering the work of the agency and the success stories that have grown from their support, from XR Film to interactive content and the amazing Future Content Expo. Leo will illuminate us all on the great work coming out of the creative content agency. Again, Leo will be joining us for the panel discussion, so please do make note of any questions that you have, and we'll be opening up the floor at the end of the session for any questions. Enjoy this presentation.
Beautiful, and it is an honor to be joined this very, very interesting XR days. And Laura, could you help me to upload? Okay, I already have. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone all around the world. My name is Leo. I'm an acting director of global business in Taika, and it is such a pleasure to join these XR days. And today my presentation title is Why Taika is Investing on Immersive Content. In my presentation, I will give you a brief introduction of Taika, what we do, who we are, and how do we invest in the area of immersive content. First, I would like to have a very quick introduction of Taika. The Taiwan Creative Content Agency, hereafter referred as the Taika, so called Taiwan Creative Content Agency, is an independent government agency established by the Ministry of Culture in Taiwan in 2019. And Taika supports 10 different cultural content industries, which including film, television, pop music, publications, fashion design, animation, comics, gaming, performing arts, and cultural technologies, also including the immersive contents. And the mission of Taika is to promoting all above the content industry's development and productions, as well as expansion into the international market. And in order to fulfill our visions, Taika applies 3 strategies to help the industry in Taiwan to reach their goals. They are industrialization, internationalization, and integrations. And the objective of this strategy are trying to building a healthy business ecosystem for the content, promote Taiwanese brand in the international market, and try to maximize the value of content. With the above 3 strategies, we wish the cultural content industry in Taiwan will evolve into a critical industry in Taiwan and try to help the content industry navigate to the world. In order to explain why Taika investing in the immersive contents, I would like to introduce a brief of the progress of digital content development in Taiwan first. As you can see from the diagrams, in the past, Taiwan has been very, very famous for the hardware focus with a significant number of the world-leading laptop computers. Almost 85% of laptop computers still manufactured in Taiwan. Companies like Acer and Asus, they are all very famous. And nowadays, you may have also found some headset companies like HTC or the VR headset companies. They are also dominate market. But however, there's a significant change taking place. The Taiwanese government is fully aware of the need to transit into and support the software development and content creations. So since 1919, a series of government policies start to support the digital content development. Taika was founded in 2019, and more strategic policy and mechanisms focused on the immersive content was found. Next, I will explain how Taika is supporting the system for this immersive content. And you can see in Taika, we have a supporting system for the immersive content for 4 stages. In the very beginning, when you're trying to create your ideas, and then Taika will try to provide you lectures or workshop for all the creators, because it's a very new mediums for the VR or XR or ARs. So they need to learn the new methodology of storytelling. They also need to learn what is new tech and what is a new tool for them to create this project. After you have a very nice ideas, we will provide the first stage of funding for the prototype, which will encourage diverse ideas to be explored and be tested. Your project can be proof of success, prove there's some potential for the service of business models. Taika will provide a second stage of fundings to help you from the ideas from the project to become a product. Then we enter the third stage, where you can prove that your product has a potential to win in the market or in the international market. Then Taika will provide marketing resources or help you to bring in your product in the international festivals or in Taika's flagship event, Taiwan Creative Content Festivals. We try to increase the product exposed to the global market. Finally, fourth stage, your team can find a sustainable business model from your service or the product or your project of XR. Start your own companies. We also provide a startup accelerating program to help you make your dream come true. Among all of the supporting systems, I would like to introduce 3 perspectives to explain how Taika invests in immersive content. They are talent, project, and distribution channels. First one is talent development. I will give you an example of the Taiwan and France XR Days. It is a very unique approach for the talent development, and it is a result of a strategic partnership between France, the New Image Festivals, and the Taiwan Creative Content Agencies. Being designed as a bilateral program to meeting and networking that aim to support and exchange the collaboration between France and Taiwan talent in the field of immersive contents. Second one is the XR Grant. It is a 3-year grant program to support international co-funding and co-production of immersive contents. And it is hoped that this program may help the content creators to explore a new way of storytelling for new markets, as well as to develop an immersive contents international ecosystems. Grant started since 2020 and has supported 10 different international projects. Type is very diverse. The project will see support including 360-degree films and digital arts and interactive games, etc. First VR film from Taiwan is produced by the movie master Cai Mingliang. Project The Deserts was nominated by the 74th Venice VR. In addition to these art films, there are also directors from younger generation involved in the VR film productions, such as Zhang Xu. His project, Groundhog's The Moon Landings, is also very successful and was selected by the 77th Venice VR Film Festivals. And besides those films, Taika also supports the VR project belongs to interactive content, the arts and gaming. Example, the Taiwanese-American co-production project, La Camera Inseparable, which was won the best VR experience in 74th Venice VR Festivals. And the Taiwan-UK co-production is a gaming project called The Lattice Worker, is also which is selected by the 78th Venice VR Film Festivals. And among all these above AVR projects, I would also like to special mention those following two domestic VR projects, Sansera and Sick Rose. Sansera is a VR film about the reincarnation. This project was also selected for the 78th Venice VR Film Festivals, won the Jury Award of South by Southwest VR Experience, and the best VR story of the Cannes XR competitions. And the second rose is the first ever stop-motion VR animation, which was produced by the international brand HTC and the local animation studio called Turn Rhino Studio. This project shows the incredible value which combines Taiwanese traditional craftsmanship and the innovative technologies. In total, Taika has already invested more than 200 million NT dollars, which almost about 7 million US dollars in the immersive content since 2020. Proof that the commitment from Taika in supporting the immersive contents. Showing the diverse immersive content which invests by Taika, let me introduce how Taika invested in the distribution channels. First one is a physical event we call TCCF, Taiwan Creative Content Fest. TCCF is an annual flagship event hosted by Taika, including very interesting sectors we call the Future Content Expo. And the expo showcases the cutting-edge immersive content projects from teams and artists worldwide, demonstrate the next stage of future content through innovative technologies. And this year, we demo more than 15 projects worldwide. It is also the first time that official immersive content from Oscar Electronica, which also shows in Taiwan. Besides these physical events, the second distribution Taika has been invested is a virtual one. We call the 5G VR cloud. The purpose of this project is trying to solve the problem that VR content is still not accessible very easily to most of the consumers. Therefore, Taika lead this project and connect with the local telecomputer companies, hardware vendors, arts and cultural institutions, and venue operators, and also cooperate with the content creators together a very high quality VR 660-degree VR film contents. And through the construction of 5G network, you can streaming very high quality VR content from the cloud directly to your living room. Shows. And we are not only create a demonstration living room, the TCCF Expo, also cooperate with museums, VR theaters, and more than 20 service points of telecom community, different cities all around Taiwan. 5G VR technology create a new imagination of future entertainment life and a potential business model for the immersive contents. The above are my simple introduction of Taika and what we have done for the immersive content. In case you have any questions or wish to start any new collaboration with Taika, this is my contact information, and I wish you enjoy the rest of the program of VR Days Europe. Thank you, and I will be joining the panel discussion later. Thank you very much. Paul, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo. Another amazing presentation, and again another very different point of view from the investment side and how organisations can help to create new content and enable new and existing businesses in the XR scene. So we are now going to have our panel discussion. The time has come. So we will be joined by one further guest, Liz Rosenthal, for the panel discussion, who I will introduce in just a moment. If I could ask our panel people to just make your way to the seats to the left of the screen as you approach the stage. I think we'll conduct the panel discussion from there, is probably the best way. As I said, Victor and Leo are back with us for the panel discussion. Marta, unfortunately, is not because she is asleep. So we are also joined by Liz Rosenthal, who is a pioneer of immersive and interactive storytelling. Liz is the founder and CEO of Power to the Pixel, a programmer of immersive content for Venice International. Board director of The Space, which is BBC and an advisory board member of Immerse UK, She's also a member of BAFTA, the International Academy of Digital Arts and Science, and a fellow of the RSA, and the list goes on. Liz is a thought leader and innovator, helping to navigate the world of festivals, finance, distribution, and audience trends to support the growth of the XR sector worldwide. So thank you, Liz, for joining us at this point, and thank you everybody else for coming along to the panel discussion. I will turn around and join you in the seats, and hopefully we will have a lively debate about what's been said so far. Go, and now I can look across the line. Oh no, I can't see everybody, but welcome and thank you all for coming along today. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that came out of all of the presentations there, but I think one of the big things that is kind of obvious from it is that XR is still quite a fragmented place. As I said earlier, in a way, there is a lot going on. And I think in terms of innovation, that's a really positive thing. There is a big question about how the worlds converge. And I think that includes content creation, but it also includes the business side of it. A lot of people have talked about how they are sustaining or growing their businesses and how people see the future. And I think something that is not at all unique to XR, but maybe is less well defined, is the triangle between what's being driven by the development of the technology, what's being driven by content, and what's being driven by money, and indeed how all of those three things link up with each other. Liz, I'm curious perhaps to start with you, as you haven't spoken so far, just to get a picture of how you see the marketplace currently. What does investment today look like, and what does sharing look like for the XR community? And what spaces do you see, because you work across a broad range of places and applications?
Hi, hello everyone. Nice to see you virtually. Hi, fellow panelists. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you just fine.
Great. So, I think I heard some of your introduction of me, I think, cut out when you were speaking. But as Paul mentioned, I think, you know, I come from, my background was in film originally. I was involved in producing and financing feature film, and then I organically moved into digital media right like the beginning of the 2000s. So, and I set up this company called Power to the Pixel, which ran the first, it was a big sort of incubator program, an accelerator program for interactive and then immersive content, and also a big event of the BFI London Film Festival for 10 years, up to 2015, 2016, where I ran the first project finance market for interactive and immersive content. So I'm really interested in this kind of ecosystems of financing, because this is, as you mentioned, this is a totally new medium. We're right at the beginning. It brings together many different silos from different industries that have their own business models. So you know, in the XR space, in the creative XR space where I'm working, there are people that come from you know, games. There are people that come from the art world, from the performing arts world, from the technology space, from the interactive design space, from many other different areas, and they've all got their different ways in traditional terms, or in less traditional and less traditional terms, of financing and distributing content. So it's all very new, and it's a sort of amalgam of different things. So what I found is it's very early in terms of business model, Paul. So that's what I wanted to say. And there are models, for example, of more artistic work that's going to festivals that's pretty much like is becoming a little bit like an independent film financing model, where, for example, you know, Victor was talking about Taika, where the soft funding is very important from government sources. We're starting to see co-productions between different producers in different territories. Then a very important element of projects that get, you know, substantial financing is, for example, money from hardware and software companies, so from headset manufacturers or from the games engine companies. And that is kind of, it's like piecing together money. That's one of the models. And then, of course, there's work that comes from game studios, which has a completely different model, which is destined for storefronts. So they've got a different sort of licensing and financing model. And then there's things that are performing arts works. So there are many, many different models. So it's quite hard to sort of generalize.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I think I mean, Victor, I kind of want to pick this up with you if I could, because that kind of financing model also crosses over with the content creation and actually what comes out of it. And you mentioned in your presentation, and I brought it up, the fine line between gaming and storytelling. And I know when we spoke before this session that you also talked about how you thought there would be more fluidity or maybe less rigid definitions of what is games, what is narrative content, what is storytelling, etc., and that you think there will be a space where all of these come together, both in business terms, but I'm also thinking in content terms. Do you want to just elaborate on that perhaps for us?
Yes. First of all, I really think that what Liz just said is very, I mean, it's very true in terms of what we're experiencing today. So we're on the story side of things. And it's true that the business models today for the stories are really, really different from everything you can see from the game companies. In terms of business model, though, I do think that it's going to be more healthy for companies if we're all able to have access to the store and to be able to retail directly to users and to viewers. So that's really where we're trying to go. In terms of like the fine line between gaming and stories, it's really all about experimenting, right? The thing is, right now we're working on a story that's very interactive, and there's a level of interactivity where you lose the feeling of being in a story, and so we're kind of like having to walk back this interactivity to make you feel more that you're being driven by a narrator and by a storyline. So the fine line is not going to be easy to find, to have something that's engaging yet passive, but in a good sense of the term. And for us right now, we're really at this phase where it's really about research, and it might seem a bit trivial, but it's pure R&D about what works, what doesn't, and we're in this phase where we're trying to establish a format. So this fine line is really, really not defined. I do think at the companies that we have to target being able to retail directly to consumers, because I think that's where the money is at the moment, and that's how we're going to be able to kind of like make a sustainable stories ecosystem.
Thank you, Victor. And I suppose a lot of that is that there is a sense that everything that we're doing, or a lot of what we're doing now, certainly is experimental. And I guess maybe this is an open question to any of the panel, really. But where do you think are the spaces right now where we can experiment publicly? I mean, how does that word get out there? If access to the stores is difficult, then are there spaces which are more suited to that experimental level of work?
I mean, I think this is a huge problem at the moment. I mean, the last Venice, because we were publishing our works in partnership with the amazing partnerships with Oculus and Viveport, who really helped us. But there's a real problem in terms of censorship for certain types of work as well, because there's certain types of work that can't be shown on the store. For example, nudity in any form is not allowed on the storefront. So you're already cutting out. And there are certain other things that are sensitive because everything's sort of aimed at 13 plus. So it's a big issue. Distribution of independent work is a real issue. We had a project from Taiwan called In the Mist that we could only show in our satellite locations and at Venice locally because we couldn't put it on the storefront. So obviously the big, we're all looking forward to WebXR. But at the moment, in terms of the huge data processing, it's only possible to show 360 work through WebXR. But that's going to be, and as Victor was mentioning, the cloud services, things are going to really change when 5G hits. So that's going to be an important area. And in Venice, something that we've been talking about with other festivals, it's a kind of collaboration, is something called the Festival Collection, where we set up a brand where any of the works that have gone to certain festivals who are part of the group are sort of, and we talk to the different storefronts, are sort of published under this brand, because it's very hard to find the work on the storefronts anyway when they get on the storefront, because most of the content is games or other types of contents that's sort of like mainstream for mainstream audiences in VR, and there's little that's curated. The curation is a real problem because you're kind of mixed into the content that's most popular, and it's generally gaming content.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak of that a little bit as somebody publishing or trying to publish on the different storefronts. I mean, obviously some easier than others, but I think it's clear for everyone to know that the Quest in particular is a massive kind of consumer device now. But in terms of putting things on the storefront, it's difficult to know what will and won't get accepted. We're working on a project at the moment about the history of UK graffiti, and the nature of graffiti is that part of it is illegal. So you know, we have questions ourselves about whether it will ever make it as far as the store. But you almost have to kind of create the project and then find out. There's no really good way of vetting that process beforehand. So from a maker point of view, that's really complex and causes problems. I mean, from a maybe Leo, this is something that you can input into from an investment side of things, and for the content creative agency, etc. What do you look for when you are investing in things? What are the key things that you know, if you have 3 bullet points that are the main things that you think make something investable and has a chance of growth? How do you see that from the investment side?
Oh, I think when we try to say the XR is really not already become a real industry, because I think at the moment most of them are still in the artist creation sectors. As you already mentioned, they are not very clearly a way to assess all of these contents, and the ways of the business model, how to get the revenue from this project is still unclear. So when Taika is doing, and it's a very, very new industries, so the government is still putting the money, trying to make this ecosystem more healthier. So just like I mentioned, we found there's 3 major points that are really critical, and that has to be encouraging for the industry. For example, the first one, why we try to do the talent development? Because we still haven't have enough person who understand how to create these new VR, these new mediums. And also there's still a lot of problems when trying to do the prototype. We're trying to, for example, experimental project, just like Liz already said. Our very advanced directors, he created the project called Inner Mist. It's showing gay activities in the gay saunas. So of course, this kind of content, you cannot show in anywhere. But somehow we still have to encourage different kind of the product, different kind of genre. They're trying to still to explore the VR in these mediums. And also third point, I think is the most important. We still have to find a new distribution channels. And once we hope if these 3 elements, they are all become more healthier and more successful, and after that we can create an ecosystem, and then we can find out the real investment, then they will be able to generate the revenue from the industries. So from this, at this stage, the government is still trying to input more, and rather than looking for the revenue at this stage, I think this is somehow the Taika is looking after at the moment. And this is the point I would like to share at this stage.
Thank you, Leo. Really interesting. I mean, yeah, again, I think, you know, I can share again from my point of view, perhaps, but what I see in terms of the investment model and everything coming through is that we've got both the content and the investment running side by side. So the content side of it is, as we said, trying to find the line between gaming, film, and kind of arts content, if you like. And I think what's quite interesting about that is if you look at the funding models or the traditional funding models that Liz talked about that go alongside those, they're all very different as well. Whether it's investment based versus not for profit in the arts, perhaps, which means that actually bringing together those different organisations can be a really tricky task, if you like. But actually, for me, I think it's the most exciting of the creative spaces is to bring together those different disciplines and those different agencies, but actually getting the funding and the finance to actually make those cross art form projects is quite difficult. Is that something that's common, worldwide? Open question to the panel.
Do you want me to go first? Sorry, I'm butting in here.
By all means.
So I think what's really difficult is a lot of the time, I mean, I'm dealing with smaller studios and businesses who are creative businesses who are making work like yours, Paul, where you've got so many challenges. You're working in a new medium, new technologies, no business model, working on new artistic forms. So everything's new and everything's an exciting challenge, but at the same point, sustaining is really difficult. So, and I think this is for anyone who's working in an innovation space, it's exactly the same, because and I've been in these kind of spaces for, over 20 years now, where the kind of things that what's really important, I would say, is how ecosystems are set up. Because for makers like you who are at the center of this, because you're creating the content and trying to license it as well as a producer, it's important. I think it's a real responsibility as well in those sort of soft funding programs to think about how ecosystems are created. It's something I'm very impressed in Taiwan that's happening. There's an incredible ecosystem between all the different community. So something I did at Part of Pixels, I realized very early on that bringing together all these people from different industries is not something that a producer can generally do. And I think any program that's being set up should really think very carefully about how it's doing, because it's all very well giving funding to creatives, but it's really hard when there's no business model. And often when you're in a position where you're a commissioner or you're in an organization, you can make those connections more easily. So the programs I've designed, they're kind of like incubator accelerator programs that always incorporate a kind of marketplace and an introduction to a range of different potential financiers and co-producers and distributors and exhibitors. So the program Creative XR that I am an executive producer on, it's a UK program where we finance 20 UK creative teams to make prototypes, and we have loads of mentoring around the process, both on the creative and the tech side and on the business side. And the first stage, we give £20,000 to each of the teams, and we help them create business plans and decks, and then we showcase them to we do a showcase program where they meet people from all over the world who will potentially finance and distribute and co-produce their project. And then we award production funding to the 3 to 4 projects out of the 20 that are that have gone through the process and have started making those connections at the market. But so I think that's really important, to the idea of ecosystems and helping introduce makers, because as a producer, I come from film, and that's one silo, and it's hard enough to, this was a long while ago, to network the whole film business. But when you've got to network across many different sectors that are evolving very fast, it's something very difficult for a producer. I think that you will say, that anyone who's a producer here will agree with. So I've worked with quite a lot of funding bodies doing helping them build programs, and I always sort of suggest to build in these kind of things into the funding.
Thank you. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to that question?
Yeah, I also would like to share the TICA's experience trying to bring different communities together. And this is somehow also reflect the example that just showing, the Taiwan Friends XR Days. And because we know we have already run the XR, the immersive content grant for the international co-production and co-funding program since 2020, and we do found a problem that we cannot find more and more new producers join this grant, because every time we see the similar faces, they have a very nice qualities. We do worry we cannot let this industry be stronger and fruitful if only this big name, only these successful producers. So we try to work within France New Image festivals. So we select 12 talent from France and 12 talent from Taiwan. And they are not previous experience in VR productions, not necessary, but they are interested in joining these VR productions. So for example, some of them, maybe they are movie directors, some people, they are artists, some of them maybe are engineers. They are also interested in joining this, creating these new VR mediums. And by this networking, they will be able to meet some of the most critical companies or most important masters in these sectors. For example, in Taiwan, we will try to help those French talent if they are interested to meet the HTC, the engineering, knowing how to they manufacturing the VR headset or how to they create the VR headset. They will have the opportunity to meet them. Because if you don't join TAICA's program, it will be very, very difficult for you to meet the HTC engineers. Also, again, for Taiwanese producers, if you want to meet some very famous French producers in the VR industries, mostly you cannot meet them. But by creating this network, we will be able to meet some of the very, very famous top creators in VR sectors. So we try to create this ecosystem, bringing different communities. So also TAICA's doing, trying to make this international ecosystem more healthier. This is something I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Yeah, I mean, again, I think what comes out very strongly is that collaboration is the key. Bringing people together is the key, and getting people from all of these different spaces to make and invest is the way forward. I think we can all clearly see what some of the problems are, and I don't think they're all willful. Maybe there are some areas where people can be adversarial and don't want to work with each other, but I think majoritively people do want to work with each other. The question becomes how, rather than whether people want to do it, and how you cross those lines between the different investment models. I mean, I think, Liz, you already kind of touched on this, but what does the future look like, you think? I mean, how can we improve this space? Again, this is for Leo, Victor, or Liz, really, but how do we actually get past this stage that we're at now? And perhaps to end on a positive note, what does that future look like, in your opinion?
Well, maybe I can start on this because as the creator, we are trying to figure out exactly what it is. I think all the questions we're mentioning today, which is how do we get funding, how do we get distribution, are really the key points. I do think that the destination where this is taking us is, or at least the exercise in which we're on right now, which is finding a business model around it. For me, it's just about going more and more mainstream. So in everything we've said, I think it's always a balance. Liz, you were talking about the fact that distribution channels also restrict us in terms of creativity, but what they take away in terms of kind of like nudity, everything, all the things that don't allow us to show, they also offer a balancing point, which is that they allow us to have a massive distribution, right? One of our biggest partners is Oculus, and we work with them on Oculus TV. And I think our content is very acceptable because it's stories about survivor of 9/11, Notre Dame, all these kind of very mainstream and approachable stories to everybody. And so I think that's what we need to prove right now. We need to kind of like focus on a wide distribution and not the experimentation just for the sake of the arts itself, I would say, but more for seeing if that sticks with the public. And we're very much constrained by the distribution platforms, whether it be Viveport or Oculus TV. These are the people on who we have to rely. So I think as long as there is no more competition in this field, as long as you don't have a strong Google or strong Apple or Microsoft in VR, we have to play by the rules and find a way to make it work. So at the moment for us, it looks like kind of being able to make sure that we can address all the people that are in VR nowadays, like currently, and to make sure that we can deliver our stories to them. And we're happy with the constraints that are being provided to us, whether it be by Oculus or by HTC, because it gives us distribution and it also gives us access to funding. So our focus and where I think this is going is really trying to make sure that we have more and more people that can watch the content, which means in terms of type of content and in terms of distribution. And one last note in terms of where this is going, we see a tendency and a rise these days in terms of the amount of people who are contacting us for licensing. So we have all this catalog of content, and we see more and more people that want licensing the content because 360 video is super easily is super easy to use. You know, they can use them in hospitals, in foster, I mean, in elder care homes. So there's a lot of usage that we didn't plan and that we actually see that catching on. So I think there's really a good space in this industry for content that is easy to distribute and that is available to everyone. So it's probably less kind of say bold and kind of like forward thinking in the sense of pure creativity and what it means for artists. But in terms of distribution, reach, and the impact you can have on people with emotional stories, I think it's pretty big.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that sort of feeds into one of the things we haven't really talked about as well, which is the audience fragmentation and the speed of change in the actual technology and hardware as well. Because one of the things that I find happening is that things are moving so fast in the space, and there's so much change at the moment. The amount of times we started off making a project thinking it's for one headset, and by the time we finished it, it's actually for a completely different headset that we need to make it and distribute it. And then when you get on the differences between 3 degrees of freedom and 6 degrees of freedom, etc. A 360 video, for example, in 3 degrees of freedom, as you said, is still really easy to share in certain ways. And there is still a big market for that, because there are people, many people, who still haven't done VR at all. And that way in through 3 degrees of freedom is easy to tackle for those people as well. But then there is a whole...
Sorry, can I talk, because I know we haven't got much time. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, because we haven't talked about the huge changes that are taking place, which is the social VR space.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've interrupted you in the middle of 360.
No, it's fine. Carry on. I mean, this is what I was saying, because the things change so fast. We're constantly kind of finding new spaces to connect in. So do go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the areas that I did want to talk about when you were talking about the future was the last 2 years. I have spent a lot of time on social VR platforms, and I know since the last 2 weeks when Facebook rebranded as Meta, suddenly the word the metaverse has come out into mainstream, and it's kind of like you said, Victor. I totally agree. Without a company like Oculus or Meta, let's call them Meta now, investing huge amounts into the space, VR probably wouldn't exist. I'm going to talk about VR. And that is totally true. And so we're all kind of grateful for that. Without the Quest, because the Quest is undersold. No other headset manufacturer can compete, on a consumer headset, because they're underselling their headset because they've got so much money. But at the same time, we do have to be wary of monopolies. And remember when the cinema, when the studios are broken up, and that whole thing about monopolies in media, we do have to be really careful that loads of voices can be represented. And I totally get your point, because it is between that choice of distribution, and without Oculus it would be really hard to mainstream this content. But when it comes to social VR, because I'm going to use social VR because I think the word metaverse is complicated and it's wrongly used. These are platforms that you are embodied as an avatar, and you can meet and other people there. There are all types of different platforms used for business purposes and for social purposes. But the one that I spent a lot of time on is VR Chat, which is an extraordinary platform of world builders. It has no business model at the moment, but it will soon. And then I think this idea of social VR is going to be, and selling sort of assets on the platform, and the whole blockchain and NFT space is going to be where it's happening as well. And it's going to be a very important part of the marketplace. I mean, every day this week I'm in something on a social VR platform. I was at something last night, and I was talking to makers who are minting their own avatars and selling them and trading. These are artists, creators. And I'm starting to see there is a whole new economy happening. I mean, even on VR Chat, even though you can't sell your avatars on the platform, I'm sure that's something they're going to incorporate now, because they had a big injection of money, of investment a few months ago. There are platforms like Booth and other places, that gamers anyway sell their 3D assets on. So there's a whole new economy starting that's very different from that independent kind of film model I mentioned before.
Amazing, yeah, and more to negotiate for all of us, which is
Yeah.
difficult and exciting all at the same time.
And it's also the idea of decentralization, I guess. That's what's exciting.
Yeah.
You know, we have no idea where it's going, and it's a bit of the Wild West at the moment, but that's exciting.
It starts to open up the possibility of people trading with each other as well as through the monopolies, as you say. We've just got a few minutes left. If everyone's okay to stay around for another 5 minutes, I was going to open up to the floor to see if anybody had any questions that they wanted to direct towards the panel. I haven't seen any come up in the chat so far, but if anybody does want to add a question, please do so. Now is the time. We've got some clapping hands and a love heart so far, so I think that's positive feedback. But yeah, we haven't got any questions as such. I mean, is there any kind of closing statements anybody would particularly like to make at this stage while we see if any questions come in? I'll take that as a no for now, but somebody is typing, I can see. So so somebody, I think it's Rick Wagner is saying, for storefront, what are the difficulties for access? I mean, are we talking about kind of access as in how people get content onto the stores there, or are we talking about accessibility in how people experience it?
Well, I think I can take this one because it's something on which we're working, the access to the storefront. So I think that if it refers to accessing for users, I think discoverability of content is definitely the most difficult point in VR. Okay, are you trying to ask a question? No. So no, if it's accessibility by users, I think it's really still a massive pain point in VR because content is incredibly difficult to find, which is why we need clear and easy distribution channels. The easiest one that exists are the stores, and the stores are highly regulated depending on which companies. But if you take the Oculus store, which is usually the one that generates, let's say, 80% of revenue for gaming companies, it's highly regulated. So you need to get your pitch approved before you start working on a game. You need to prove that you have the funding, that you have the track record and everything. So these are the difficulties we're talking about. It's just restriction in terms of what is allowed on the platform. And if it's bad for us as creators, because we're not able to create, everything we want and get it out there, it's also a good thing because as users, the positive point is we only have high quality experiences.
And also, I guess there's the thing about App Lab. It's completely different from going through the store and having that arrangement. So I don't know if you want to talk about that as a maker. Have you used App Lab? Because that is more open. Obviously,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is more open, but I think like completely in terms of business, it's either seen as a track to go onto the real store, or it's seen as a failure because you will never get your money back on your investment if you're only on the App Lab.
But it is a way of, I mean, if you pass when you put your application into App Lab, at least you can get on the store and do. Obviously, it's about doing the marketing off Oculus because you're not going to be in the storefront.
Yes, but then it's also a way to get access to the store. In that, so I think it's a phase. Either it's a test, either it works and you get to the store, or it doesn't work and you get stuck there.
I think there was a question: is it about accessibility to Oculus and being able to be in contact with them? That was. Did I miss that? Sorry, I've lost where the chat is.
Sorry, let me try to see.
Really weird because it's disappeared my chat and I can't get into
the chat. I mean, I think the chat is echoing exactly what you're saying. People are talking about the problems with publishing into the Oculus store and the gatekeeping around that. But then App Lab, again, there is as you say, there is a business problem that comes with that in terms of you're not directly selling or you're not getting the exposure that you get through the Oculus store.
I think someone said something though about how difficult it is to be in contact with Oculus, and that is, I entirely agree, because the problem is they're kind of like the only game in town, really, at the moment. I know, of course, there's different platforms like, PlayStation, but really when it comes to a storefront, like you just said, Victor, they're super important, and it's 80% of the revenues from game studios are coming through there. So I totally agree, and that's why I set up these accelerator programs, because I can get the person. And I'm not trying to say, oh, great, I can get people. I know I can call the person from Oculus, and they're gonna turn up, and I can introduce them to the people I know, the kind of projects they're going to be interested in, because I've had so many. There are 2 projects that I've executive produced that have been financed, actually 3 through Creative XR, with substantial amounts of money. That are creative projects, non-game projects, and it's really difficult for makers. I totally agree. You're never going to get through if you don't know them, and that's the problem about virtual festivals. In a way, it's really broken that ability for independents to be able to network, because you know what it's like when you go to a real live event. You can go to a drinks or something like that, and you can kind of say hello at least and try and connect, or get someone to introduce you to them. But it's been really hard this year. So I think these accelerator programs are an absolute must, because it really helps makers and producers get in front of these people, because it's very, very difficult. I totally agree.
Liz. Yeah, and I do wonder if things have gone sort of almost backwards, because there doesn't seem to be the capacity to respond to everybody and find out what the reasons are things aren't going in. But you know, with things like the Rift store, it used to be the case that as long as you you know, passed the technical restrictions and you're at work properly, it would go on the store. Whereas now the gatekeeping has got more restrictive, not less, and maybe that's an issue for the sector. I mean, somebody asked, is there a more fair and efficient way to do this? I think we'll probably have to say yes, but we've run out of time. So perhaps that's one to think about. Our time is up here. So I'm going to say thank you to our panel. I'm going to say thank you to our audience, for everybody who came along. I hope you've had a really enjoyable morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of your night, depending on where you've joined us from. And of course, a big thank you to VR Days and the organisation behind all of this, who've put it all together for us. Yes, thank you. We'll see you again virtually, perhaps around other areas of the festival. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I do hope you can join any others that interest you throughout the festival.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry, I can't
Bye.
remember how to wave.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. I'm going to claps here. It's F4 to clap, I believe.
Oh, F4 to clap. Okay.
I think
Sorry,
so, yeah, that's what
completely
somebody
forgot
put in
about the
earlier.
waving. Oh no, that didn't work. I'm on a Mac.
Yeah, well, perhaps it works. But thank you very much, everybody. We will leave the room now, and thank you all for attending. Appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Leo and Victor.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna walk out like this because it seems
Oh
more
yeah, that
more
does. You're right. You're
more
so
natural
right.
than
I
just
should make an
disappearing.
effort.
There we go.
Goodbye.
Hey, everyone. Can't even walk straight. It's easy being in VR.
Right, and now click to walk through or exit the room.
Hi, Paul.
Farewell,
Thanks very
everyone.
much. Sorry for interrupting you.
That's all right. Yeah, it was a pleasure, and always great to hear your point of view, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicely moderated. Hi, Hi, Victor.
Hi, Liz. Thank you, Paul. It was great to connect.
Thank
I
you.
think it's an interesting session. It's interesting because I think all the opinions kind of, go toward I mean, we all pretty much have the same view on distribution and, how the business working. So there tends to be less difference than I think there was like 2 or 3 years ago in these panels. And I think the convergence we're talking about, games, stories, business models, is kind of happening already.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I say, I think it is happening, and I do genuinely think a lot of it is.
I'm so sorry. I've got to go. I'm late for a meeting. I just realised. Thank you.
All
Lovely
right,
to meet
Liz.
you. Bye.
Bye, Liz.
Bye. Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of it is people want to work together. Some of it is how, the different business models are also barriers in themselves, aren't they? And actually, in some cases, I'm sure there is, say, an adversarial side of it. People don't want to work together, but for the most part, I think people want to join up now. But it's not always that easy to actually do in practice.
Yeah, interesting to see how people the difficulty of access to Oculus, which for us seems, we're working a lot with them, so we understand their perspective, and we see that they have limited amount of. I mean, they're exactly in the same position as us, and I think that's what is not really well understood is that they really don't, not that they don't know what they're doing, but they're looking for what's working as much as we do. So they're really relying on us, and they don't have a master plan of what they want to do. They're waiting for creators like us to figure out what's actually working, because they don't know.
It creates kind of not bottlenecks, but it's like a circular conversation. I mentioned the graffiti project that we're working on at the moment, which is a 6 Degrees of Freedom interactive piece about the history of UK graffiti. So, you know, the Oculus store in itself is not going to pay for the production. So we're looking for public funding. And as part of the public funding, we're saying we want to put it on the Oculus store. But, you know, by the time we've got the funding, we don't actually know if we can put it on the store. But we can't ask the store until we've got the funding because, you know, we haven't got any funding to make it. So it's that kind of area where I think it becomes very complicated very quickly. And you just have to, you know, on a wing and a prayer, we'll make the project. We hope it gets onto the Quest store. If not, you know, we can do a version for Steam, or we can do a version for even the Oculus Rift store, because it's still an open platform relatively. But just means you're constantly juggling your workflow as well. So it's tricky, but you know,
I totally agree.
I get that they want a more you know, that there is a quality control thing that's going into the store at the moment, but I'm sure that could be as much to do with the way they market it as whether they let things on or off. You know, if they want a kind of featured area or whatever, it can still be much more curated, but actually not to give access at all is quite problematic for finding new work, I think, as I say, actually searching for things. Oculus.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's true. But I guess this is what App Lab's trying to solve.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get there.
So. Yeah.
Let's stay in touch,
cool. Okay.
Victor. Pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, yeah, thank you very much, and I was saying that I think App Lab is just trying to get there. But yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for hosting this session, and we'll keep in touch.
Cool. Cheers, Victor.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So hello everyone, I guess it's my turn now. I'm Hannah Louet from the Institut Français in Paris, France. And I wanted to just tell you a few words about our actions in promoting French VR abroad and in fostering collaborations between French professionals active in this field and international professionals who are also active in the VR field and who would like to know more about what we do to kind of encourage collaborations. So today, we're just going to quickly run through, because it's a quick pitch session, some of our programs that might be of interest to you. So first, a few words of introduction for those of you who don't know us. What is the Institut Français? Who are we? So the Institut Français is the public institution responsible for the international cultural actions of France, and we operate under the supervision of the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs and the French Ministry of Culture. And the Institut Français, based in Paris, works with over 130 cultural services and of the French embassies around the world, and 98 Institut Français around the world, and there are 130 plus branches also throughout the world. So it's a big network which also collaborates with the 850 Alliances Françaises, so which are locally governed associations that are also set around the world. So it's a very a huge and powerful network of institutions that really are implemented all over the globe and that work together to promote initiatives in various fields. So, for instance, ideas, social innovation and linguistic cooperation, intellectual engagement, performing arts, visual arts, etc. I work for the Digital Cultures Department, and we have also several actions, but we have various programs in the field of XR and VR. And today I wanted just to mention a few programs that we have that might be of interest to all of you. And the first program is Digital November, Novembre numérique, as we say in France, which has been proposed by the Institut Français and the French Cultural Network abroad since 2007. So we're celebrating the 5th anniversary this year. And it is the International Festival of Digital Cultures around the world. So it's an invitation to question the place of digital cultures in our societies, to increase the awareness of the general public to the new uses of digital technologies, while also discovering the richness and the diversity of digital creations. So we're talking about virtual reality, video games, media art, digital art, to also new forms of narratives, immersive theater, interactive music, etc., etc. So it's really a huge, broad festival, but there's an opportunity to discover French VR creations in this on this occasion, which is really at the core also of this program, which really acts as an opportunity for all the venues across the world to present French VR creations, and to also encourage discussions and collaborations between French and international professionals. So you just see some of the VR, the broad spectrum of the digital creations that are showcased on the occasion of Digital November, for example. And then we have a few actions that are more specific to French XR and French VR. So first, La Sélection VR, the VR selection. It's a catalog of approximately 30 French VR productions that the Institut Français in Paris has acquired the rights for non-commercial distributions across the world by the venues of the French Cultural Network and their partners. So the idea is really to encourage them to program French VR works and to encourage their publics and their audiences to have a chance to discover VR and discover the richness of French VR creations. So if you're a programmer and you're interested in French VR, so this is for non-commercial distribution only, but most of the times the venues across the world, they have collaborations with local partners to present this French creation. The second program we have is a catalog which is called the VR Immersive Experiences Catalog. And it presents close to 40 original works that are at the intersection of VR, entertainment, and visual arts. And this catalog is designed to introduce partners of the cultural network abroad, so theaters, museums, cultural centers, art centers, and so forth, to new kinds of shows and exhibitions that meets a growing public demand for these forms of entertainment and cultural offerings with a strong digital dimension. And this, in each work in this catalog is presented in the form of a summary sheet describing the experience for the audiences and all the technical requirements that are needed to present the works. So it really intends to help promote these works and in this case to encourage international programmers to have all the necessary information to program these works, and in this case not in a non-commercial frame but in a commercial distribution context. And last but not least, I also wanted to tell you about this new program we have upcoming, which is the launching of a website called IF Digital, and it will be released in only a few days on November 24th. And this new website will gather presentations of the French digital creation artworks. It's really a general digital creation website which will present digital art, virtual and augmented realities, video games, innovative books, etc., etc. And the idea is to have a detailed presentation of artworks and also a directory of the French professionals that are behind these works so that you can easily identify them. If you are an international programmer and you want to program French works in the frame of your events or venues, or if you're an international producer, or you are seeking for collaborations with French professionals. So really, I encourage you to go see the website as it is launched next week. There will be many creations and many VR works especially. So it could be a great source of information for you in the frame of your upcoming projects that could involve French professionals and French artists. And you also have my contact information if you would like to receive more information on this program and on the other programs I just had a chance to mention today. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I am available to answer them in a few seconds. Thank you for your attention. Yes, please feel free to either ask your question in the chat and I'll answer them orally. Where can we find your contact info? So I think the screen maybe is still up. You can find my email. I can also put it in the chat bar. So my name is Hannah Louet at the Institut Français, and I'm posting my email address in the chat so that you can email me directly if you need. Thank you very much. I'm still around if you have further questions. I think Lucy is still typing, but